Driving out of Emerald Bay the second time for a storm chase felt so much different than before, given all that I now understood. Especially when it came to the people who I now worked with. Natalie was at the wheel, her trim figure looking so minuscule against the bulky frame, and yet I had seen quite recently just what sort of fighter she was. In the back, Jim Lasher was watching the monitors, his eyes dashing back and forth between screens to get a better idea of where we were headed. To think of how many times he had been through this, and yet he still always wanted more. Then there was Kearney. Paul Kearney was standing up near the very rear of the long camper, starting towards the road that we had been on, as he used his door to prop his body up. From this angle, as the sun dipped low again over the horizon, he looked like a captain at the mast of a ship, watching the open ocean as his crew set out for adventure. But this wasn't an ordinary voyage we were embarking on by any means. I was beginning to get the feeling that we were the Pequod, and he was our Captain Ahab. The roads north of Emerald Bay were scarce with life or even crops. Just dead earth and scars that ran crisscross, making the whole place look like a barren waste. According to Jim, we still had about 13 miles to go before reaching the beacon, and screens showed the storm was moving to the northwest, lingering near the mountains. Could that be where this supposed nest was that they were so eager to find? I didn't know what to make of any of it. From Natalie's tense expression, it seemed clear she was nervous too. "Is your first time out here?" I asked her as I came back from the minibar, offering her warm coffee. She yawned and took it before saying, "No, actually my second. The first didn't go very well." I placed my beverage down in the cup holder, apologizing quickly. "Sorry, I didn't know." "It was a winter storm. Strong southeast winds moving across the state line that Mr. Kearney wanted to track. I wanted to prove that I was valuable for more than just crunching numbers," she said as she looked into the horizon distantly. I didn't say a word, listening as she recounted the experience. "Back then it was me, Nick, Caleb, and of course the boss. We were in high spirits because Jim had just managed to figure out how to build a probe. It was time to go and test it on a live storm. The radar picked up some fluctuations, so we went without hesitation." She clutched the wheel nervously. "It was actually thanks to my astronomy that the probe even worked at all. I worked side by side with Jim. The math was perfect. Everything should have been perfect." I looked towards the road. The realization of what happened dawned on me. Nick died, didn't he? "The storm was too strong. Calculations were off. We couldn't stand up against it," Natalie said as she reflected on the event with a glazed look in her eye. "Mr. Kearney, he insisted we push forward. He refused to believe we could fail." I thought back to the chase a few days ago where Martin had been hurt, and how Paul had acted similarly. Was he really so blind to this pursuit that he was willing to risk anything and everything for the sake of the hunt? "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have brought it up," I admitted. "It's right after that Martin and I got close. He told me there was nothing I could have done for Nick." She paused and looked towards me. "I guess that's just a forecast for our whole relationship, huh?" I leaned over and sipped some of the coffee. "What made you decide to stay?" "I guess the mystery of it all. What the storm is. Maybe a part of me wanted to fight back after what happened with Nick. Mostly it was Mr. Kearney, though. He was insistent that my concepts for the probe were spot on. With more work, it could have been perfected." She gestured towards the sky, adding, 6 months later, it looks like maybe he was right." She laughed nervously as we kept driving, and I glanced back towards the rear of the camper where our boss stood. "What do you think is keeping him here, then? I mean, why is he doing this?" Natalie looked me dead in the eye. "Isn't it obvious? Revenge." I nodded, realizing she had come to the same conclusion as me. The storm had taken what he cared for most. "I just hope that hasn't transformed into blind rage," I said softly. Neither of us said a word for a long time as we passed the next stretch of road and spotted something off in the distance. I leaned forward, seeing a glint of sunlight reflect off the object, and Natalie remarked, "That's the beacon, I think." I banged on the back of the camper to get the others' attention. Kearney and Jim came up front as Natalie slowed the camper down. "Good work. Looks like she's still intact," the old man said. Natalie pulled the camper alongside the highway and turned off the engine, as Jim and I started to gather extension cords to reach the device. "I'm surprised no one bothered out here," I said, as we lugged the long cables over the grass. "Not many people use the old roads. Lots of ghost towns out here," Jim mused as he opened the paneling on the side of the cylinder and punched in an activation code. I looked about the barren land, spotting a few mountains off the south. But besides that, he was correct. There wasn't a sign of civilization for miles. "Come on, work, dagnabbit," Lasher said, smacking the beacon on the side. "Problem?" Kearney asked as he gingerly walked over. "Says it's connecting, but I'm not picking up anything. Should be right on top of us, actually," Jim admitted in confusion as he looked up. There wasn't a cloud to be seen. Nothing but clear skies. "You got the coordinates right, and you're patching into home base?" "Maybe that's the issue. I need to start running the algorithm for the triangulation," he said, as he rushed back to our vehicle. Kearney was ruffling his hair and looking around. The air was colder, and Natalie hugged at her body. "Something feels wrong about this," she said. Lasher made it back to the camper and turned on the equipment there as Paul kept scanning the clouds. "Hey, Jim! Bring me a flare gun!" he shouted. The stout man was back at the beacon in a heartbeat and passed the flare to his boss. While Jim started working on the code, Kearney grabbed his crutch and moved to the side of the camper. "Natalie, help me to this ladder," he demanded. They watched as the blonde pulled the ladder down and Paul climbed up to the top of the camper. Then, using the roof satellite, he pulled himself up and aimed the flare gun towards the heavens. A second later, he fired and the flare streaked upwards quickly. I watched until it disappeared from sight and frowned. It exploded across the sky, revealing something hidden. The empty sky began to swirl, pushing clouds together into a central mass. Then a streak of lightning burst across the newly formed storm as it kept growing bigger. Jim hit the monitor again and again. "I'm picking up something now, but it's gonna take a minute to transmit." I kept looking at the swirling clouds as they got darker and darker and the wind picked up. "I don't think we've got that long." A low, deep noise boomed from the storm. It sounded like the waking of a mighty beast. Then, as I watched with morbid fascination, the clouds seemed to form the shape of an eye. "I think we need to go," Natalie realized as she saw it. Meanwhile, Paul was smiling, but when he noticed our distraction, he called out, "Dylan! Natalie, don't look directly at it!" I rushed up the ladder and shouted back, "Sir, we need to move, and I mean now!" The equipment in the van was already registering wind bursts up to 33 miles an hour. Lightning crashed down, only about 30 feet from the beacon, and Jim held his chest, frightened at the close proximity. He quickly detached a flash drive from the device and rushed to the camper, muttering, "I'll compile it on the road." Paul was climbing down from the roof as the roars from the storm grew louder. Then the funnel began to form. It was larger than before, at least the size of an F3. The camper was rocking before it even touched the ground. "Get in," I said as I helped Mr. Kearney inside. Once the doors were shut, Natalie wasted no time pulling into the driveway. "Dylan, the camera. It's the only way we can monitor that thing without it hurting us," Paul told me. The twister hit the ground on the east side with a reverberating crash. With the speeds rising over 90 miles an hour on the equipment scans, it could easily become an F4. "Shit," Jim muttered as I moved to the rear and got the camera ready. The back of the camper also doubled as the equipment carrier for the heavy camera, so setting it up wasn't difficult even as Natalie picked up speed. I turned the lens towards where we had come from and watched as the massive tornado devastated the flatlands. "Things moving pretty fast," I said, watching it rip past us on the horizon. Our equipment now rose to 150 wind speed from this distance. The storm pushed its way past us, striking against a body of water right off of view, and I checked the maps. "We need to turn around." "Are you crazy? It's intercepting us," I said as the funnel was moving towards a bridge that we would have to cross. "We're not gonna make it," Lasher agreed. Natalie pushed the camper to its limits, but it wasn't enough. Almost 2,000 yards away, the mighty twister smashed the bridge apart like it was nothing. Concrete and slabs of pavement flew up into the restless cyclone in a matter of seconds. Natalie slammed on the brakes and turned the wheel as sharp as she could, our tires skidding and avoiding some of the debris as we moved towards the side of the river. I held the camera steadily and heard the storm roar louder as more massive chunks of stone and cement flew past us. One of the windows in the back shattered and our vehicle barely made the U-turn, but somehow Natalie managed to keep all four wheels from lifting off the ground. Bloody hell, Jim said as he hung on for dear life. Soon we were speeding down the highway in the opposite direction. The storm was not far behind. At this point, our equipment couldn't even register the top speeds that it was reaching, but it had to be over 200 miles an hour. Kearney quickly scrambled for a map. We need to find shelter, he muttered. From behind us, the inhuman shrieks began to rumble across the sky, and I watched several of the creatures burst out of the tornado and fly across the heavens. The whole sky was alive with the storm's fury as I kept recording. I briefly glanced away from the lens to get a better look with my own eyes, only to find myself covering them, as a direct glance was like staring at the sun. It hurt so much I had to turn away and cuss profusely. It took a few seconds for my eyes to refocus. Nobody ever listens, Paul quipped as our own pedometer reached 77 miles an hour. The thing's catching up, Jim said to our frantic driver. I can't go any faster, Natalie screamed frantically. The storm was almost on top of us. This chase had now become a hunt, and we were the prey. Here, it's an old train yard. They probably have some well-fortified bunkers there, enough to even withstand this, Kearney said, pressing the map to the dashboard. Natalie's eyes darted back and forth between the chart and the road as she struggled to keep from losing control. Can we make it there? She asked. Before Paul could answer, one of the creatures latched onto the roof of our camper, causing the whole vehicle to shake. Hell, Jim muttered, grabbing the flare gun and then shoving the roof hatch open. He aimed it towards the creature's abdomen and let it rocket straight through the beast. It exploded in fire and the creature shrieked again as it fell, colliding against the side of the camper as he turned a sharp corner onto a dirt road. Dust and more debris kept spinning in the air as the twister took a shortcut, smashing up farmland. I could see the train yard that Paul had mentioned about 13 meters away, but the twister was picking up speed. There was a long stretch of tracks about the road where I saw an old freight train sitting. The cyclone was almost on top of it. Come on. But it was too late. I knew it. The train didn't stand a chance. As the massive storm hit it, it was flung like a tinker toy. Natalie swerved right as she saw the metal and gears fly about chaotically. The air pushed around us. The camper crunched as it went over a part of the tracks and into the yard. The train hit the back of our vehicle and sent us up in the air. Natalie lost control. I held my breath and watched as we spun through the air. Equipment crashed down around us. The window shattered. Mr. Kearney bashed his head against one of the counters. And Natalie screamed. And then the world went black. Hey there kids, it's me, MrCreepyPasta, and I just wanted to tell you thank you for watching tonight's video, or listening to tonight's episode of the podcast. And as always, I want to give a very big thank you to everybody who supports me on Patreon. If you scroll down to the description at the very bottom, you'll find a whole bunch of people there. Also, we've included this nice little scrolling thing because the number of people who support me on Patreon has gotten so big that I'm afraid it might actually max out the description. So we've included this here as the little scrolling text on the end screens. So everybody on that scrolling text, everybody I'm about to mention right now and mispronounce all of your names, and everybody who can donate even $1, thank you so much. A very big thank you to Jordan Alexander Sanchez, Stephanie Butler, Reaper61167, Bobby Karman, Tristain, Pelton, Chance Burnett, Diana Kraus, Vicky McQuicky, SamaHigh, CrusaderChocobo, SpookyShel, Atomaurus, Grand Moth the Milky, Big Smoke 369, Captain Scurvy, SaltyIrishPoet, Estebean, Brayden Morris, Nate Kuhl, HorrorFan1212, Hour Minute Second Time, Kyle Reznak, David Martin, Scare-ington the Unkempt, Robert Malcolm, Angelus, Spanky, Snoochie Boochie, Seclude, Lupita Galvin, That Creepy Chick, Tyler Fletcher, Merxenum, Red Shadowcat, Xavier the Cheyenne, Demix, Sean Cadieu-baker, 6 Gay Rats in a Trenchcoat, Turtleman, Rob Like Sharp Things, Cryolinian, Xavier Graphius, Lord Life's Best, Goring Tremagacy, Maria Walker, Emily Mitchell, Crazy Kid, Mr. Marcus Blitz, Eka Limchok, Dirt Diver 030, Matt Bach, Voice of Sand, Coffee Zombie, Hidden Tiger, Shelly J, Jeremy H, Psychomel, Nana, Deleted Account, Melted Lake, Tali Sue, William King, Darth Miver, Michael Ortiz, Satanic Aries, Bardo Hawk 764, Lambda M98, Harley, Sashi Suzaku, Cronut 509, Kaylee Ambrose, Suji Campbell, Stricken, Freddy Krueger, Happy Birthday Jason Wilson, Lisa Cottrell, Caspian, Hades Nephew, Tater Chip, Acid System, Prozac and Pancake Appreciation Society, Benjamin Welverick, Cryptic Nightmares, Kiri the Sloth, Fester's Lampshade, Sky Harbor, Nico Kyle, Rafael Rodriguez, The Ginger Bros, Aaron Stormcrow, Daniel Polson, and Corey Kenshin. As always, thank you guys so much, because you guys help me do everything that I do here. You guys help pay authors for stories and commission stories and do everything that I can do to make this channel and make this podcast the best it could possibly be. So thank you all for supporting me here. And as always, everyone, sweet dreams.